Good afternoon, everyone, and I would like to thank you once more for joining us this afternoon for our live webcast in joint partnership with Microsoft. In today's webinar, we will be focusing on the newly released Visual Studio and TFS 2015 new features. We will be looking at the key features, improvements of VS 2015 and TFS 2015, including Visual Studio Code, IntelliTest, web tooling, Git improvements, and more. And towards the end of the presentation, my colleague will be looking at the important licensing changes and special promotions. I am proud to be joined today by two of my colleagues, Colin Bills, who is a developer tool technical specialist from Microsoft, and our CTO, Valerie Relay, who heads up our technology and R&D team and department. So I'll quickly go through the agenda. The presentation will last between 30 to 40 minutes and plus a Q&A towards the end of the presentation. So before I pass you over to my colleague Colin, please feel free to again type in your questions on your Q&A pod at the bottom of your screen now or during the presentation. We will answer all or most of your questions if time allows. A full screen is also available at the top of your screen if you need this, which might be useful when my colleague Valerie will do his own demo this afternoon. So without further delay, I now pass you over to my colleague Colin, who will present VS and TFS 2015. Colin?
Thanks a lot, Mel. Thanks, everyone. Hi. I'm going to be presenting a little bit of what's new in Visual Studio 2015 and TFS 2015. As Mel mentioned, my name's Colin Beals, and I'm a Visual Studio technical specialist working for Microsoft here in the UK. We don't have much time, so I'm going to get straight into some of the content. And first of all, just give you a bit of a history lesson, just to make sure we're all on sync with Visual Studio editions. And I'm going to talk about the previous edition, 2013, and just mention the family of what we had in 2013, so we can take a look at what we've got in 2015 as well. So in 2013, we started with a community edition of the tools, which is a free edition of the Visual Studio tools for non-enterprise customers. We then had a professional edition of the tools, which brought into a few new platforms that you could develop against and professional tooling to support that audience. Alongside that, we had Visual Studio Test Professional with our testing tools, incorporating all of our test case management, manual testing, and exploratory testing tools. Overarching that, we had our premium tools, which then brought in what I would class as our code quality tools, a little bit of automated functional testing tools through Coded UI, and some stuff to do with collaboration through something that we called My Work, which enabled you to work with TFS and Visual Studio Online in an optimum way. Finally, we had an Ultimate Edition, which brought in numerous other tools, some of which are things like our architecture tooling, the load testing tooling that Valerie will be talking about later, IntelliTrace, and CodeLens. So this is 2013, and clearly we're here to talk about 2015 today. So 2015 looks very similar, but slightly different. So the first thing I should say is we continue to have a free community edition, but you'll notice that we brought functionality from some of the higher levels, in this case, the premium edition of My Work, into the free community edition. So everyone, regardless of whether they've got a paid edition or a free edition of Visual Studio, will get that piece of functionality. Moving forwards into the professional edition, we'll see again that this brings in our professional tooling, but again leverages something from one of the higher versions, the Ultimate Edition, this thing that we call CodeLens, which is a heads-up display to help developers as they're writing code to understand more contextual aware information. Alongside this, we continue to have our test professional tooling, and of course we're making enhancements to this tooling, but largely the kind of end game of what it's trying to accomplish remains the same. We have then probably the largest change that we have in the family of tools, where we've elected in the 2015 editions to bring together the Ultimate and Premium levels into a new edition that we call Visual Studio Enterprise. Visual Studio Enterprise is now our top level of Visual Studio. If you're on either Premium or Ultimate editions, you will be moved to this new Enterprise edition by default. The good news is that Enterprise is significantly cheaper than the Ultimate edition. I think nearly 50% cheaper, and it's only a slight increase from the Premium edition. So that's all good news that whether whichever level you're on, when you come to renewals, you'll be able to get the Enterprise edition, which will either have a lot more tooling for you or will be costing you significantly less. Moving swiftly on, though, let's talk about what's actually in some of these in the Visual Studio 2015, so you get a flavour for that. The final bit that I will mention here is the introduction of a new member to the family called Visual Studio Code. And I just want to talk a little bit more about that one to introduce it. Visual Studio Code is different from the Visual Studio Integrated Development Environment, or IDE, in the fact that it isn't an IDE, it's just a code editor. But it is a code editor that works across different platforms. It's completely free of charge, and it works on Apple, it works on kind of Linux, and of course it works on Windows. But it provides you great coding editing experiences for each of these platforms. Specifically, it supports 30-plus languages on release, and we'll look to do more. And it enables, by doing that, things like syntax highlighting, but it also leverages things like IntelliSense that we're used to in the full-featured IDE to enable you to develop code very, very quickly, regardless of the platform that you're on. Now, because this isn't a full IDE experience, we don't have access to the full range of application lifecycle management tools that we do in Visual Studio, but we do have access to version control through the use of Git that we can also integrate into the Visual Studio Code experience. So that was just a brief introduction. It's not an IDE, but it's a very cool code editor for getting work done across platforms. Moving on to kind of new things within the Visual Studio world, kind of the main IDE. Of course, alongside the main IDE, we have new platforms that we're introducing. So there is a new version of .NET, the version 4.6. We have new compilers, so things like the Rosalind compiler that we've been working on in the background for about the last 5 years now, which now is a newly written compiler for managed code supporting C# and VB.NET. Of course, that means that there are new editions or new language versions of C# and VB.NET, and so C#, for example, is on C# 6.0. I shouldn't forget our friends using unmanaged languages, and of course there are new features in our C++ support as well. Alongside these language and platform modification or improvements, also some new framework improvements, things like the ASP.NET platform moving forwards to a new version 5.0 edition. All of these provide us improvements that then are integrated into the Visual Studio 2015 experience. So moving on into the IDE, we've got some improvements there. Firstly, we've been improving on our connected IDE experience. In the past, we've been able to incorporate logging into Visual Studio so that we could do synchronization. We can now go a little bit further than that and actually have multiple accounts logged in, as shown here with my Microsoft and my Hotmail account logged into Visual Studio. What this enables us to do is incorporate and use multiple services, things like or Visual Studio Online, using different accounts at different times without needing to log in and out each time we need use of a new service. We also, of course, continue to do personalization, so the synchronization of settings across your workstations as you log into different boxes. And one of the cool features I really love about this is a new feature that enables you to specify window layouts that you like within the Visual Studio IDE and very simply move between these and apply different window layouts. This is really useful if maybe in the office you're used to having multiple screens, 2 or 3 monitors with window layouts that support these, but then you get on a train or you go home and you're using a single screen environment like your laptop, and you're able to move seamlessly between these 2 environments. Moving swiftly on, the IDE also benefits now from some refactoring or quick actions, as we call it. We've leveraged the popular light bulb metaphor to actually enable you to do refactoring within your code in a very lightweight way. You'll notice that this is using our new Rosalind under the scenes to actually compile your code and then provide us with a representation of what the code would look like in a before you actually make the code change. This is useful all over the place within the IDE and gives a new experience to Visual Studio users. Let's also say, if I were to extract this method, as I've just kind of shown in the screenshot, it would then take me to our new rename experience, whereby we'll highlight all of the things that are matching the thing where your cursor is, and you can make line change to the name of your method, your variable, and it will be reflected everywhere within your code. And of course we'll tell you if there are any conflicts or things like that, but simply hitting enter at the end of that will then apply the change of the rename that you're doing. All of these refactorings and quick actions that we're putting into the box are extensible through our new analyzer technology, and you can write your own analyzers, the community can write theirs, or you can incorporate them into libraries or NuGet packages that you may well be providing for others, so that they get inline quick actions for your own experiences as you so choose. Again, moving on, within the IDE, we've been doing some work around the developers using breakpoints. You'll notice that whenever you set a breakpoint in the usual place, that there is now a tooltip for the settings, and when you go to that tooltip, those settings, that will actually be an inline experience now. So no longer are you going to a separate dialog to set the conditions and actions of the reasons why your breakpoints will break and the actions that it should take when it does so. You can do that all inline, which is a nice improvement to the experience. Moving again on, we've made improvements to NuGet. So in NuGet, we realized that we very much push you towards using PowerShell for everything, and there wasn't necessarily a nice user interface experience for working with NuGet packages. I'm pleased to say that 2015 very much provides this functionality now, giving you access to more of the NuGet kind of functionality to go and install packages at the versions you want into the applications as and when you choose to do so through a nice UI experience. Within the IDE again, we also have something new called Perf Tips. Perf Tips, you'll see I've shown through the arrow here, is a very simple representation when you step over code or a set of lines of code. You'll see a number of lines of code. Actually, then the length of time it took to actually do that execution. In this case, I've stepped over a single line, and it's taken about 38 milliseconds to do that function call. So this is a nice way to inline be able to see whether a method or a set of code takes longer than you expected in an inline way. We're finding developers are finding performance problems that they never really thought were problematic just because we're giving that inline representation to them in the IDE. We've done more work around performance though, So we've decided, or we've implemented a performance hub that we park onto the right-hand side of the IDE experience, that as you're debugging your code, will give you a more visual representation of what's going on. The first thing that you'll see is a timeline view of debugger events. So as key events happen within the debugger, we'll draw a little marker on a timeline that will give you that representation of that debugger event. We'll show you in a timeline again your memory and CPU usage, so that you'll be able to spot any spikes or increases in memory that you weren't expecting. And again, further to this, we can then go into more debugger events, such as taking snapshots of memory at any point in time. And you can take multiple snapshots and actually compare these with each other through the integrated development experience. Moving on again, so this is something that I'm hoping Valerie might get a little bit of time to show you later on. But just to mention, we a new functionality called IntelliTest, which is really about being able to enable you to get more code coverage with your unit tests and thus improve the quality of your code. IntelliTest looks to intelligently generate unit tests that will cover as much of your code base as possible with unit tests. So if I took this one method, this calculate exemption for rent, and I run IntelliTest on it, it will run through the code and give me a series of unit tests that represent the current functionality of that method. I can then go and fix up any problems. So it's found a couple of errors in this instance that I would need to go and fix up. But it's a great way where you don't have code coverage to go and get some code coverage at very low cost to you in terms of time spent to do so. It's also a system that will continue to evolve as you generate new code. That the IntelliTest will change the code, the test that it creates to match the new code that's now in play. Moving on to a new world, a lot of you will be doing web development, and we've incorporated a lot of the modern-day web tooling into Visual Studio. So a lot of those crazy name projects, things like Gulp, Grunt, Bower, NPM, all of these sorts of things which have crazy names but are very useful in web development to be in accomplishing tasks, particularly on the client side around JavaScript. You'll notice that we now incorporate that into the IDE experience. So you see in the image here that actually a task runner is being shown, that Gulp is providing some integrated tasks there. Really all we're doing here is calling out to these tools as if they were on the command line, but we're doing that to you in a nice, neat and natural way that you enjoy in the IDE. You'll see here I've got a Bower kind of example, whereby when you're filling out and looking for your dependencies, you can see that all of the different versions are shown to you as you're typing out your Bower JSON files, all of which helping you to deliver web applications fast with modern tooling. Of course, some of you will not be doing web apps. You'll be doing things like Windows 10 applications. And of course, we have support for Windows 10 Universal apps within Visual Studio 2015. So it doesn't matter whether you're writing for Xbox, for a large screen device, a PC, a tablet, or a phone, you can use Windows 10 to do so and target the Universal Apps framework to actually providing applications that work across all of these range of devices. But that's not to say that other platforms aren't also embraced within the Visual Studio IDE. We have cross-platform development support for things like Apache Cordova and Xamarin, each of which enable you to write applications that will run on Windows Phone, but also on iOS and on Android devices. And you'll see that we've created a new Android emulator directly within the IDE so that you can start debugging and using these applications and running them against an emulator that runs against our Hyper-V technology and works a lot faster than some of the other market emulators out there. Of course, we support other languages, things like Node.js and Python, and there's new embedded tooling to help you write against these languages where you need to. So finally, before I hand over to Valerie, what about Team Foundation Server? Well, Team Foundation Server and Visual Studio Online continue to move forwards also. So we put in a whole new build platform for TFS and Visual Studio Online. So we've ripped out the old team build system, or rather alongside the existing team build system, I should probably note, rather than ripping out. But certainly we can run alongside with a new build system that's very powerful, flexible, easy to use, and runs across different platforms, again for Mac, Linux, and Windows. As well as build, we've made improvements to the web user interface around our task and our Kanban boards to make these kind of much, well, firstly, they're visually more appealing, but also more informative, with the ability to put avatars on of users, custom fields that you can pin, and have lengthened titles that look more natural in the user interface. We have wiki experiences through something that we call welcome pages that enable you to use Markdown, very similar to how you might have used on platforms like GitHub, to actually develop welcome pages that are integrated into your projects. You're enabled to do online code editing within the web user interface now, which means that those quick changes that you might need to make can all be applied directly on the server without needing to go to Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code for checking in. You can literally do that direct against the server. We'll take a note of who did that change and when they did it, and apply any new builds that might need to be fired as a result of that code implementation. We've made improvements to version control through Git. So an example of this is we now have branch policies that enable us to make sure that branches are of a sufficient quality before they're merged into a parent branch. Finally, we've worked on the integration features of Team Foundation Server to bring it in line with Visual Studio Online, which has a new REST API and something that we call service to enable us to integrate with other external tool sets, making it much easier to connect these platforms to other toolings that you might have alongside them. I'd like to hand over to Valerie from Test House to give us a demo of some load testing and some other tooling like application insights.
Thank you very much, Pauline, for this presentation of what's coming next with Visual Studio 2015. So here we go back again. So I will just summarize quickly what I've done here. So I want to to Azure. I created a new team project. So this team project is linked to Azure, and if I go to my Visual Studio Online, I should be able to see this new project I just created. Okay, so you can see that Azure and Visual Studio Online are connected together. So now I move back to Visual Studio, and I'm going to create a new project. So as a developer, what I want to do is create a website. So I'm just going to create a ASP.NET website. Let's call it Visual Studio 2015 demo. And also what I want to do is take advantage of Azure. So here I'm also going to use a feature called Application Insights, which will provide some details of what's happening within the application. So it can look at client usage, it can monitor the performance, the availability of the web application. So I'm just linking into an existing account I have on Azure, and I'm just going to create a new application insight resource for this website. So just click OK. Just going to create a basic MVC web application, and you can see here I've got the option to deploy or to host the application in the cloud as a web app. Okay. So Visual Studio is currently creating the project for me. Obviously, because we want to integrate with Azure, we have a few forms to fill in. Let's call it, if that's available. No, let's put TH at the end. Here we go. And we're going to use Visual Studio Ultimate. And here we go. So we're currently setting up Visual Studio and Azure. So it's creating the project here on Visual Studio, importing all the libraries and everything. So it's taking a few seconds. I move back to Azure. I might be able to see what's going on. Not yet. I'm just going to use Team Foundation version control. And here I can decide where to store my source code in Visual Studio Online. So I'm just going to create a folder, web app, and create a subfolder with my solution. So you can see that a lot is happening in the background, integrating with Visual Studio Online and Azure. It's going to install a few NuGet packages. So again, like Colin mentioned, there's a lot of improvements on NuGet, and already in 2013 there was a lot of improvements where packages were downloaded only when needed. It will take a few seconds. So while it's doing that, let me go back to Azure and see if my web application has been created. Here we go, so Visual Studio 2015 demo TH. So we can see that Visual Studio created this web app on Azure on my behalf. So no need to go to Azure to do that. It's being done in the background. And then what we need to do here is we have Visual Studio Online. Sorry, we have Azure. We have our source code, and what we want is, in this example, we want to have continuous integration. So what I need to do is to link my source code, my project, to this web application. So if I scroll down, you can see there's a deployment section. If you click on here, I can select where my source code is coming from. So you can see there's many options available here. Obviously we're using Visual Studio products today, but if you were using third parties, you see you're not limited to only Microsoft. And that's a new tendency from Microsoft. It's it's actually embracing competition in a way, and giving the opportunity of any vendors, any open source project to integrate with Visual Studio, with Azure and Visual Studio Online. So I'm just going to select Visual Studio Online here, and hopefully I should be able to find the team project we just created, which is here, Visual Studio 2015 demo. So now what we have done is we have linked our Visual Studio Online project to this web app. That means we have continuous integration, and when we will make changes to the website, hopefully within minutes, the changes will be reflected on the website. So this is what the website currently looks like. So it's a vanilla template where it says your website is configured, and now you just need to put your code in there. So moving back to Visual Studio, here we go. So we have a template ASP.NET application. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to check in my code I just created. 640 items, quite a lot to deploy. Obviously, the ASP.NET project contains quite a lot of features out of the box. And this code is being checked into Visual Studio Online. Or in a second, I should be able to see that. Let's wait for this to finish. There we go. We should get a success. Here we go. Successfully checked in. So now I move back to Visual Studio Online. And if I go to the code section here, I should be able to see the code I just added to my team project. Okay, so we created a web app folder, and we can see that this is the solution we just created. So we can find all the code in there. So that's one aspect. Now, what we did, we linked Visual Studio Online with Azure. So if I go to the build section, we should have a build definition created by Azure. Okay, and if I go to the queued builds, we can see that there's a build now being queued. So that's continuous integration kicking in because I checked in some code. There are some changes, so the build has been triggered. So it might take some time because we are in the queue. So while it's doing this, I probably will go back to Visual Studio, but let's have a look. We just refresh this so we can see no changes so far. Okay, so let's move back to Visual Studio where it's doing this. Colin mentioned something very interesting, which is called IntelliTest, which is a new feature in 2015. And IntelliTest is trying to address some of the common issues you have with a dev team. You have legacy code. This code has not been unit tested. So there's a lot of code that developers are kind of afraid to change, to refactor. So we keep this code, and this code is actually hurting your development process. So in order to drive those unit tests, it's probably time consuming. So what Microsoft has come up with is this IntelliTest feature that will automatically generate code or unit test for your functionalities, and it does it in a clever way. So it analyzes your code and then creates the relevant unit test it believes would actually test your functions, your methods. So if I go here, I'm just going to add a new class with some code in it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up some code I already prepared. Here we go. So it's just a basic method, nothing fancy, probably a lot you can argue about. But the point here is to demo IntelliTest. So this is a simple method which takes a parameter which is a field value, and this field value, depending on what value you have, it will return a different string. Okay, so it just returns some specific details about the application. So what I can do here is right-click, and you will find a new option which is called Run IntelliTest. And I just run IntelliTest, and what is happening right now is doing some analysis of this method, and it's going to determine a set of unit tests that will do enough coverage with this method. So it will take a few seconds. You can see the result appearing here, and it actually detected 3 different unit test methods to achieve that. Okay, so one with the field value being copyright to exercise the first switch statement, another one for company for the second case, and the third one which will fall onto the default switch response using the null value, but any other value would have also worked. Okay, so if we're happy with that, we can actually select those test, save them, and once we save it, it will generate a new a new project called demo.test, and you should be able to see the generated unique test. So there's some wrapping around, but you can see here we test with a new string, we test with company, and there's a third one which is testing with the copyright value. Okay, and once you've done this, they actually become a proper test. So if I go to Test Explorer, I probably need to build the application first. It should appear within Test Explorer. Here we go. And I can just select those and run them. And hopefully they should all pass. Here we go. Okay, so you can see this is an easy way for you to start adding some unit tests to make your code more resistant to defects when you start refactoring or making changes to it. Okay, so let's move back to this build. If I go back to Visual Studio Online, so we can see that it ran for 5 minutes, and it did pass. So if I move back to my website and just refresh, we should see the new deployed website. So you can see that I didn't have to do any complex work. It just deployed the application automatically for me because I linked Visual Studio Online and the Azure web app. So one nice feature you have also with this integration, it's something called Application Insights. So Application Insights is something new in 2013, in Visual Studio 2013, and it added the capability for you to monitor the application online instead of having to use very complex code or any third-party solutions. So if I go here, I should see my application inside for Visual Studio 2015 demo. And here I can have different views which shows how my application is behaving right now. So there's various items I can look at, application health. I can see how the application is currently being used. I can see various other things. So we can see the application is up and running. We can see a number of requests. So far 6 requests. So if I just do some more work on the application, they should be reflected here. So sometimes it takes a bit of time before it actually refreshes the data properly. We see 7 and so on. And if we want, we can see other bits of information. So if I go to usage, we have information such as a type of browser which is currently used. So we see IE 11, Chrome 43. So if you at work you want to play with it, if you go to this Visual Studio 2015 demo th.azure website.net, then we will see that the analytics changes because we'll see the different browser you're using as well. Okay, so that's what you get out of the box by ticking the right checkbox when you create your web application. So here we go. So we move back to, I'm sorry it's taking longer than expected. We had this glitch. So what I'm going to do next is create a new project, which is a web performance and load test project. So here what we want to do is load test our application, and again take advantage of all the integrations we have between Azure, Visual Studio Online, and Visual Studio. So So I created a new load test, so it created a new web test for me. So I'm just going to add a recording to it. And I'm just going to navigate to the application URL. Here we go. Do some activities here. Maybe try to register. Here we go. I'll just stop here. So once we created this new web test, he actually reruns it to make sure it does work as expected. It's also doing something called dynamic parameters detection. So this is a simple test, so it should pass. Let's give it a few more seconds. Here we go, it's marked as passed. So now we have a web test. So this is testing a business process. We're going to add another item which is called the load test. So this time is actually using both business processes and combining them together in a load test. So we have only one web test, so it's going to be very easy. So I'm just going to do a ramp up from 1 to 10 user. Actually, let's say 20. So we have only one test here. Actually, we could also use the unit test. We are not meant for that. Okay. Here we go. Let's run the test for 3 minutes and a half. And what you can see here is new as well. Is now we can run load tests from various locations. So it's no longer, I think before it was more limited in which location you could choose. So when you use this wizard, now you can decide where you want to run your load test from. So I can just decide to go to West Europe. And here we go, it created our load test. And what's interesting as well is we have application insights in place, so we can also decide to collect even more information from application insights. I don't have my website here, so I cannot do it now. But if I wanted to, I could monitor things like CPU and so on. So we have our load test ready. So the next thing we need to do is to run this load test. But before we do that, we are going to check our test settings. So the test settings is the settings we're using to run either a load test or a coded UI test and so on. So you see by default it's selected run test using Visual Studio Online. So we don't have to do anything. By default, this load test is going to be run on Visual Studio Online. I just press run here. And what happens now is going to provision a load test agent onto Visual Studio Online to be able to run this load test. The load test will execute and load test the web application that has been deployed on Azure. And to do that, we're actually using what we call virtual user minutes. So it's credits you're using every time you do load testing, and this is time you buy from Microsoft. So what's interesting is, for instance, here I'm using my MSDN account, and by using MSDN, we get free credits for builds and load testing. So you can see that we get every month for free 20,000 virtual users minutes we can use. Again, if we don't use it within the month, they get lost. So it's use it or lose it. And similarly, we can use build on Visual Studio Online. We get 60 minutes every month for free using MSDN. If you need more, you can associate a credit card, and you can then buy more minutes or more minutes for build or load testing. So our load test is currently queued. So it's going to take a few more minutes to hopefully not too much, but it's going to take a couple more minutes to kick in, and hopefully we'll see our load test running. And what we should see as well, while the test is running, we should see that application insight is showing us that the load is being generated against this web application. Maybe while it's provisioning this server, we might go back to the presentation, and then in a couple of minutes I will just take you back to the demo. Okay, so here at Test House we actually are specialized in software testing, so we do manual test automation, performance testing, and any other testing aspects, test management, and so on. And also, because testing cannot be done without developers, deployment, and so on, we also do the application lifecycle management, specifically around TFS. So we have experience with various companies in UK, a lot in UK. We also have a subsidiary in India as well, and also Middle East and America. So we have experience with various companies doing different bits. And also we have experience with tools vendor. So obviously Microsoft is one of them, but we also do work with IBM and HP, and some smaller vendors for more specific needs, such as mobile testing. Obviously, around this, there's various technologies we need to interact with, so being SAP, Dynamics, SharePoint, so some Microsoft technologies, website testing, other technologies such as Java, and so on. So our offering is quite widespread, but just to summarize the key main ones, we can assist you with deployment. So if you need to install TFS, if you need to upgrade TFS, or anything related to TFS, we can help you install the software, customize it. Obviously, TFS out of the box is a great tool, but you probably have a process, and you don't want to lose everything you worked on so far. So we can adapt TFS to work alongside your process. We also do integration if you have third-party applications you want to work with. Again, TFS is your main repository, and you want to collect all the information within TFS. This is where you get all the value of TFS. So if you have a third-party application, so let's just say Jira, you should integrate it with TFS, and then you get even more valuable information out of your applications. We obviously provide consultancy in software testing, functional, performance, manual, and others. I already mentioned that. And also training, because we know the tools, we can explain to you how to use them properly. We're also a Microsoft Gold ALM partner, so that gives us access to a wealth of information that also shows our competency. We will also do something called DTDPS, which is deployment tools, deployment planning services, and it's helping you make the right use of the application. So this is free services, and if you're entitled to it, actually Microsoft gives us days to help you achieve that. And just to mention, we're having an ALM event in London on Friday. That's quite short notice, but I think we have a few more seats available, and it's we're doing it at Victoria in the Microsoft office in London. So if you want to register and come and see me in person, you're welcome. So the link is currently displayed on your screen. Before we wrap up, maybe if we can try going back to the demo. Oh, okay. I think I'm no longer there. So just trust me. We've run the load test, and if we go to application inside, we can get valuable information about how the web app did behave. So to wrap up, I will hand over the microphone to Colin we will close this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Valerie. Apologies for the small technical issues at the start of that, but hopefully you got to see great information there on how to create that as your website and then start to apply that with application insights and a load test against that. Truly believe that, obviously, in terms of what you would have seen if we'd have flipped back to that, is those graphs filling out with lots of information around that. So I'm sure that would have been on Valerie's machine if we'd have had time. To kind of wrap up and summarise, we mentioned the Visual Studio 2015 editions, so be aware of the fact that we've now moved to this new Enterprise Pro and Test Pro editions, with obviously community for sort of a smaller non-commercial use or non-enterprise use, as mentioned in my previous slides. All of those editions, Enterprise Pro and Test Pro, are available with MSDN as well, which obviously give you credit to Azure so you can get up and working just like Valerie just did in his demo. A closing set of actions before we go to Q&A. Of course, Visual Studio 2015, the release candidate that we've been using for the demos and I showed the functionality of, is all available for you to go and download. So you can go download that today. The link's there in the bottom left-hand corner. Equally as well, there is a TFS release candidate for 2015. Again, you can sign up for that. You can go grab that. And you can sign up for Visual Studio Online. Again, the link's there in the bottom left-hand corner. So get started with this stuff, try it out, give us feedback, and show us, tell us what you think of this stuff. Before I close out completely though, just a couple of commercial bits really to mention. Currently, Microsoft have an offer in place for in effect the Enterprise edition of the tools that you've seen today. So what we're offering is a Pro to Premium upgrade today at half price. Discount that you can get on that Pro to Premium upgrade, and of course being on Premium today will mean that as soon as we release 2015 over the summer, you will automatically be on Enterprise, which will be the top level in equivalent to the ultimate set of tools today. So it's a great opportunity. This is available through all of June. So until the end of June, for you to upgrade those tools that you have at professional level up to the highest level possible in Visual Studio for 50% off. Finally, I should mention that, of course, tools are all well and good, but it's always great to have some helping hand to kind of get you up and running with our tools. And what you may or may not be aware of is the fact that when you buy Microsoft product, through software assurance, you get accredited with deployment planning services days. Consultancy that you can use for projects with Visual Studio and application lifecycle management, to name a couple of them. And you can use these to invoke a partner such as Test House to actually do on-site consultancy that Microsoft will fund as far as the consultancy time. So it's worth working with Test House or through your reseller to work out the amount of deployment planning services days that you have available, and then you can invoke those against a project on-site with Test House, utilizing our technologies. And with that, I'd like to close up, and I'll pass over very quickly to Mel. I know we're a bit over time, but if we've got any time for questions, that would be great.
Great. Thank you so much, Colin. As Colin mentioned, I know we are short for time, so I'll just kind of take a couple of questions, and after that, we'll take some of it online. So I've got a couple of questions here. First question is, do perf tips work with remote debugger? I think that's for you, Colin.
Okay, yeah, that'll be me. So Performance tips, within the integrated development environment, they work with the remote debugger just fine, So what happens there is we keep the performance the bit that's calculating the metric of how long a performance tip took, or an invocation of a method or a set of methods. We keep that as close as possible to the tin that it's executing on. So let's take it, for example, the cloud. The remote debugger itself in the cloud does the calculation locally, and then that is thrown across the remote boundary down to the IDE. So you don't actually end up with any latency in the figure that you see. It's all done against the actual tin that it was executed on. So it's really close to the code.
Great. Thanks, Colin. One last question before we go. You did mention release management. Have there been any improvements to that in TFS 2015? Colin?
Okay. So, I didn't mention release management almost on purpose. We are working on release management. It's probably another one of those areas of mass improvement that we're working on. Unfortunately, that won't be ready to ship with TFS 2015 when it ships. So what will happen with that is, in our update model, so every 3 months on premise we do an update. We're targeting update 1 to actually do a mass release of new bits around release management. Now it's likely that they will also hit online probably before that date in some preview capacity. But keep an eye out for those. So absolutely, we're fully committed to release management. In fact, we've done some great work tying it in with this new build system that I mentioned earlier to make them utilize the same platform between the two, so that you can move very quickly between builds to actually releasing code in a very consistent way that will seem very, very familiar. So we're very committed to being able to deliver that. Thanks for the question, Mel.
Perfect. Thank you. That wraps up our Q&A session. Before we go, just to give you a quick summary of today's presentation. So the recording will be available within the next couple of days. Hopefully all the demos and everything will be okay. If you do have any further questions for Colin and also for Valerie, please do forward them to me. My details are on your slide right now, and I'm hoping to forward those to both Valerie or Colin if you do have any questions, as I mentioned. So thank you very much, Colin and Valerie, for your valuable presentation today. As I mentioned, or Valerie mentioned, we have a TFS ALM event coming up on Friday. So if you guys have got nothing to do tomorrow, it's an all-day event, free lunch, free refreshments, and you will be, Valerie will be obviously talking to you guys about TFS in more detail. And also the DTDTS, as Colin and Valerie mentioned, if you are interested in that, please do let me know as soon as possible. And as I said, thank you all very much for joining us this afternoon, and once again, hope to see you once more on our next webinar session. Thank you.